Hello, we are back again with Genesis chapter 31. uh, Genesis chapter 31 is a little long, but whenever you've married a couple of women, your father-in-law is trying to cheat you and get you to stay longer. It takes a while to tell that story. So we're going to jump right in. Like and share, let other people know about it. That's the best way to share this. You can join. We'll have some stuff coming up soon for the paid people, but otherwise it just helps us keep this going and keeps the word of God going out. So if you can spare it, by all means, let me know. Let me see where my collar's at, because my bride will get mad at me if I'm on here looking silly. So let's jump in. Genesis chapter 31, and I'm going to read from the New Living Translation. It says, "But Jacob soon learned that Laban's sons were grumbling about him. Jacob has robbed our father of everything," they said. "He has gained all his wealth at our father's expense." And Jacob began to notice a change in Laban's attitude towards him. Then the Lord said to Jacob, "Return to the land of your father and grandfather and to your relatives there, and I will be with you." So Jacob called Rachel and Leah out to the field where he was watching his flock. He said to them, "I have noticed that your father's attitude towards me has changed, but the God of my father has been with me. You know how hard I have worked for your father, but he has cheated me, changing my wages 10 times, but God has not allowed him to do me any harm. For if he said, 'The speckled animals will be your wages,' the whole flock began to produce speckled young. And when he changed his mind and said, 'The striped animals will be your wages,' then the whole flock produced striped young. In this way, God has taken your father's animals and given them to me." I really like that line too. Your father's attitude towards me has changed. Sometimes you notice that and you think, is that something strange? Sometimes it's God really showing you something. Pay attention to it. I recently did not pay attention to it, even though God was being very clear about somebody's attitude towards me, and I didn't act. But verse 10, "One time during the mating season, I had a dream that saw the male goats mating with the females were streaked, speckled, and spotted. Then in my dream, the angel of God said to me, 'Jacob.' And I replied, 'Yes, here I am.' The angel said, 'Look up, and you will see that only the streaked, speckled, and spotted males are mating with the females of your flock. For I have seen how Laban has treated you. I am the God who appeared to you at Bethel, the place where you anointed the pillar of stone and made your vow to me. Now get ready and leave this country and return to the land of your birth.' Rachel and Leah responded, 'That's fine with us. We won't inherit any of our father's wealth anyway.' I love the fact they didn't really care because they weren't getting any money out of it. But he has reduced our rights to those of foreign women. And after he sold us, he wasted the money you paid him for us. All the wealth God has given you from our father legally belongs to us and our children. So go ahead and do whatever God has told you." So Jacob put his wives and children on camels, and he drove all his livestock in front of him. He packed all the belongings he had acquired in Paddan Aram and set out for the land of Canaan, where his father Isaac lived. At the time they left, Laban was some distance away shearing his sheep. Rachel stole her father's household idols and took them with her. Jacob outwitted Laban, the Aramean, for they had set out secretly and never told Laban they were leaving. So Jacob took all his possessions with him and crossed the Euphrates River, heading for the hill country of Gilead. 3 days later, Laban was told that Jacob had fled, so he gathered a group of his relatives and set out in hot pursuit. He caught up with Jacob 7 days later in the hill country of Gilead. But the previous night, God had appeared to Laban the Aramean in a dream and told him, "I'm warning you, leave Jacob alone." Can you imagine if God told you that and you went, "Yeah, but Laban caught up with Jacob as he camped in the hill country of Gilead, and he set up his camp not far from Jacob. "What do you mean by deceiving me like this?" Laban demanded. "How dare you drag my daughters away like prisoners of war? Why did you slip away secretly? Why did you deceive me, and why didn't you say you wanted to leave? I would have given you a farewell feast with singing and music accompanied by tambourines and harps." How many of us remember him saying, "Hey, I'm ready to go," like a long time ago? "Why didn't you let me kiss my daughters and grandchildren and tell them goodbye? You have acted very foolishly. I could destroy you, but the God of your father appeared to me last night and warned me, 'Leave Jacob alone.' I can understand your feeling that you must go and your intense longing for your father's home. But why have you stolen my gods? I rushed away because I was afraid, Jacob answered. I thought you would take your daughters from me by force. But as for your gods, see if you can find them, and let the person who has taken them die. And if you find anything else that belongs to you, identify it before all these relatives of yours, and I will give it back. But Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the household idols. Another reason not to marry two wives is one of them might lie to you. Just some practical advice. Do with it what you want. Laban went first into Jacob's tent to search there, and then into Leah's, and then the tents of the two servant wives. But he found nothing. Finally, he went into Rachel's tent. But Rachel had taken the household idols and hidden them in her camel saddle, and now she was sitting on them. When Laban had thoroughly searched her tent without finding them, she said to her father, Please, sir, forgive me if I don't get up for you. I am having my monthly period. So Laban continued his search, and he could not find his household idols. Then Jacob became very angry, and he challenged Laban. What is my crime? He demanded. What have I done wrong to make you chase after me as though I were a criminal? You have rummaged through everything I own. Now show me what you found that belongs to you. Set it out here in front of us before our relatives for all to see. Let them judge between us. For 20 years I've been with you, caring for your flocks, and all that time your sheep and goats never miscarried. In all those years I've never used a single ram of yours for food. If any were attacked and killed by wild animals, I never showed you the carcass, and I asked you to reduce the count of your flock. No, I took the loss myself. You made me pay for every stolen animal, whether it was taken in broad daylight, or in the dark of night. That's another thing. If you've done everything God told you to do and somebody's cheating you, that's okay. Stay on God's side. Stay on the right side. You know who you are. But I worked for you through the scorching heat of the day and through cold and sleepless nights. Yes, for 20 years I slaved in your house. I worked for 14 years earning your two daughters, and then 6 more years for your flock. And you changed my wages 10 times. In fact, if the God of my father had not been on my side, the God of Abraham and the fearsome God of Isaac, you would have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen your abuse and my hard work. That's why he appeared to you last night and rebuked you. Then Laban replied to Jacob, These women are my daughters, these children are my grandchildren, and these flocks are my flocks. In fact, everything you see is mine. But what can I do now about my daughters and their children? So come, let's make a covenant. You and I will be a witness to our commitment. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a monument. Then he told his family members, Gather some stones. So they gathered stones and piled them in a heap. Then Jacob and Laban sat down beside the pile of stones to eat a covenant meal. To commemorate the event, Laban called the place Yehar Sahadua, and Jacob called it Galid. So when Laban declared, The pile of stones will stand as a witness to remind us of the covenant we have made today, this explains why it was called Galid, witness pile. But it was also called Mizpah, which means watchtower. For Laban said, May the Lord keep watch between us and make sure that we keep this covenant when we were out of each other's sight. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you marry other wives, God will see it even if no one else does. He is a witness to this covenant between us. See this pile of stones, Laban continued, and see this monument I have set between us. They stand between us as witnesses of our vows. I will never pass this pile of stones to harm you, and you must never pass this pile of stones or this monument to harm me. I call on the God of our ancestors, the God of our grandfather Abraham, and the God of our grandfather Nahor to serve as a judge between us. So Jacob took an oath before the fearsome God of his father Isaac to respect the boundary line. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice to God there on the mountain and invited everyone to a covenant feast. After they had eaten, they spent the night on the mountain. Laban got up early the next morning. He kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then he left and returned home. I know that's a lot, but we have to remember it's a lot going on, so it takes a while to explain it. Sometimes we want to learn the Bible in just a couple of paragraphs. I had somebody ask me once, just like, give me a synopsis of Revelation. I said, it's the end of the world. That's about the best I can encapsulate it. But in reading this, we learned that Jacob had a really similar life to Abraham. He was wandering around. The divisions and separations in our life from bad judgment, selfishness, or sin are normal. Sometimes we make a really bad decision and something is taken, separated away from us because of our own doing. It wasn't even involving God. We just messed it up. But he knows it's time to leave. Something's changed with Laban, and he knows something bad's about to happen. His time is up. In verse 14, the two sisters said to Jacob, "Do we still have any portion of inheritance in our father's house?" Basically, after all this time, they figured that their father had given up on them. They're not getting anything from this guy anyway. They knew their father wasn't going to care for them. So Jacob was really their only chance. They're breaking allegiance with their father. And in verse 16, they say that all that Jacob's God took from Laban belongs to us and our children, meaning they are completely breaking allegiance with their father and making a kind of renewing allegiance with Jacob. We're going to follow your God. We're going to do everything that your God has for us and our children. So it was tradition, and immediately this gets questioned because it's tradition that whoever possessed the family gods controlled the family kind of dynasty and was the owner of the family wealth and authority. So by stealing these gods, she wanted to assure a family inheritance. So they had just said, "Hey, Jacob, we trust your God. We're going to go with you, us and our children. That's all we get. We're not getting anything from Dad." And then they go steal Dad's gods. So they were trusting but doubting, as we all do. Like, I trust God with everything, but I'm going to go out and I'm going to make sure too. And that's kind of what they're doing here. So obviously Laban goes after them, and God says, "Hey, don't bother Jacob." But immediately he asked about his missing gods. He really wasn't worried about the girls. He wasn't worried about the grandchildren. It was the missing gods, his little idols. Rachel says, she's not going to stand because she's on her monthly cycle, which makes sense because to Laban, he thought she would never be sitting on these gods during her menstrual cycle, because that would have made, them unclean and her unclean. And so he thinks there's no way she would have done that. So he didn't even look there, which was really kind of smart on Rachel's part, even though she's stealing idols. So, he just couldn't fathom that she would intentionally transmit uncleanliness to the idols. He just couldn't figure that part out. So Jacob's now in his 90s. They make a treaty not to war, and then have the covenant meal and sign the agreement, seal the agreement. They didn't really sign anything back there. And basically the only terms were that, hey, don't come hurt me, don't marry other women, and don't hurt my daughters. That was pretty much it. I love that Jacob's in his 90s. He's become wise enough to pay attention to the way people are treating you. And sometimes we think, well, somebody's not treating me bad, they're treating me good. But not treating you bad does not necessarily mean they're treating you good. Some people will spend a whole year and a half plotting against you, even though they're grown and in their 60s, and still not tell you the truth. But, that's just the way it goes. You have to kind of bask in the wisdom of God. Ask God for clarity. Study his word, and he will tell you more than you could have ever possibly imagined. So that's what you're doing. Keep going. I know it's hard to understand, but we are more than halfway through Genesis. We're almost to the end of Genesis, and I got great news. Exodus has even more in it. And then we'll get to Leviticus, which is the best book of the Bible. Ask anybody. So God bless. Share, comment, leave me a message. Tell me how I'm doing, good, bad, indifferent. Whatever you want to do, let me know. Give me some feedback. Remember, love God, love people, and change the world.